A building shut down at a South Bay college. Students held in quarantine all over the fear of Ebola. It was an unfounded fear. I'm Dwayne Brown. We'll have the story tonight on KPBS Evening Edition.
Plus, the first legal medical marijuana dispensary in San Diego may open by the end of the year after city approval. We'll talk with the shop owner and an attorney about risk and concerns. I'm Peggy Pico with that conversation. And how diverse is your neighborhood? The answer may surprise you. What our iNewsSource partners found out and how you can check your neighborhood.
Known, run along, now run along.
And it's been more than 100 years since researchers first identified dyslexia, but parents are still fighting with school districts over how to help students with this common learning disability. KPBS Evening Edition starts right now. Hi, good evening. Thanks for joining us. Health worries at two local colleges tonight, one real and the other a false alarm. Part of a Chula Vista College campus was evacuated for a while today, all because of an Ebola scare in one classroom. It turned out to be a false alarm. Yellow tape was put up around a building at Southwestern College after a student told an instructor she'd been missing classes because her sister was hospitalized with flu-like symptoms. A story started circulating on social media saying the sister had been on the same plane as a Texas nurse now being treated for the disease. Late today, the student recanted her story. School officials say she has missed several classes and was in danger of being dropped from a class. They say they are trying to dissect the entire incident. Now, there is a real health concern tonight on the campus of San Diego State. A female student is critically ill with a form of meningitis. The university says as many as 400 other students may have been exposed at two fraternity parties last week. The bacteria is transmitted through close face-to-face or oral contact, like kissing, sharing a glass, or even sneezing on someone. Students are being told to watch out for symptoms, including a high fever, severe headache, a stiff neck, and a rash. The director of the Student Health Services Department says early symptoms resemble the flu, but because meningitis moves fast, it's important to see a doctor quickly.
We're treating students with the exposure preventatively, but we're also advising them if they develop any of those symptoms, don't come to us. Don't go to their family doctor, don't go to an urgent care center. They need to be seen in an emergency room where a more complete evaluation about possible meningitis can be made.
We've got the list of symptoms of meningitis online at kpbs.org. Opponents of San Diego's minimum wage increase collected enough signatures to force the issue onto the ballot. KPBS Metro reporter Taryn Minto joins us with this update. Taryn, remind us about the specifics of the increase.
Dwayne, earlier this year, the City Council approved a plan to raise the city's minimum wage to $11.50 by 2017. The first phase of that was supposed to go into effect in January, but a business group launched a referendum to put the measure before voters. The city clerk today confirmed the opposition collected enough signatures to qualify the measure for the ballot.
So what happens next?
Now the measure goes back to City Council, which will decide whether to rescind the increase altogether or put it on the ballot, which will likely be in 2016. The City Council is expected to discuss it on Monday.
KPBS Metro reporter Taryn Minto. San Diegans cut their water use by 4% last month. County Water Authority compares last month to the same time last year. They say a 4% cut is good, but more conservation is needed. Here's the latest picture of California's drought status. Look at here, 60% of the state is in exceptional drought. The brick red areas on the map. San Diego's still mostly in extreme drought. Federal forecasters say some parts of the state could get above average rain and snow this winter, but they say it won't be enough to end the drought. San Diego gas prices have fallen to their lowest level in 3 years, but the oil industry and some community activists worry prices might go up sharply after the first of the year. KPBS reporter Eric Anderson says the price increase is linked to California's landmark global warming law, AB 32.
Transportation fuels will likely become part of the state's cap and trade system to control greenhouse gases. After the first of the year, fuel sellers will have to buy carbon credits to offset the environmental impact of their product. The California Legislative Budget Analyst says that could add 12 to 20 cents to the cost of a gallon of fuel. Reverend Gerald Brown says many people he knows just can't afford that.
We support members of our community who often are forgotten here in San Diego, the ones who struggle to afford the basic necessities of life. This includes groceries, utility bills, children's clothing, and fuel for their cars.
Gas prices are already high in San Diego County, and community leaders worry that adding to the price of gas could do more economic damage here. Rosie Valerio of the Hispanic Chamber of Commerce says even a few cents a gallon can be a big price hike.
We have, kids we're putting through college. There's a lot of expenses, and when it's a family that's working and doing the best they can, most of the time the places where they live is far from where they work.
The Western States Petroleum Association is rallying opposition to the move. The industry group hopes enough people turn out at a California Air Resources Board meeting next week to stop the change. Eric Anderson, KPBS News.
In the North County Escondido, City Council has rejected an appeal to create a shelter for migrant children. A government contractor wanted to convert a former nursing home to house children caught crossing the border illegally. The Planning Commission already said no, claiming the plan was incompatible with the neighborhood. The contractor appealed, but last night, Council voted 4-1 against the project. A mixed-use project for Carmel Valley is heading for final approval. Getting the green light from the Planning Commission, neighbors and developers have been at odds over the project with concerns about traffic, safety, and the size of the development. The latest proposal has been downsized. If approved, it would be across the street from a busy shopping center on Del Mar Heights Road. San Diego, the city of San Diego's first legal medical marijuana dispensary may open by the end of the year. Peggy Pico finds out if the new rules will clear up the clash between local, state, and federal laws.
The proposed shop, called a Green Alternative, got the go-ahead from the city yesterday after passing all requirements. If no appeal is filed, the shop in Otay Mesa will be the first to get city approval since medical marijuana was legalized in California 18 years ago. Joining me are my guests, David Blair, owner of A Green Alternative and business and ethics teacher at San Diego State University, and Kimberly Sims, a local attorney who specializes in medical marijuana law. Welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you.
David, do you think the city's new rules will appease both sides, those who are concerned about access and those who are concerned about safety?
It's a step in the right direction, but we'll never have full consensus on this issue. I don't believe so. So a direct answer to you is no.
How long have you been waiting to open your shop?
We started our work in February. We've been paying rent since March.
And how much did it cost you to go through this process?
Over $100,000 just so far.
Okay.
So.
And Kim, what do you make of San Diego's new rules to regulate dispensaries? Are they enough?
I think it's certainly a starting point. There's no question about that. And I agree with David in that there's going to be a long battle to find that balance. And I'm not sure we'll ever make everyone happy, but I can say that the City Council definitely erred on the side of caution here. And there are dozens of people that wanted to do this and simply could not find a spot because there were so few available to meet all the criteria.
The strict criteria.
Correct.
I see. David, are you worried about a clash between state and federal laws since the federal government still recognizes marijuana as an illegal substance?
No, not so much because of Eric Holder's and the Cole memo that was produced last year. The Cole memo states 8 separate items, categories, that as long as you're not involved in any of those items, such as selling to a minor or taking product from across the state line or money laundering or gang activity. We're not that way.
And so the feds then said that basically they weren't going to interfere
Yes.
if you did not, if you didn't fall into any of those categories.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
Well, let's talk more about this, Kim. San Diego city officials have shut down more than 163 medical marijuana shops that were operating without permits over the last few years. Are there legal grounds for those closures?
There are, yes. The California Supreme Court ruled that a city's land use and zoning powers are very hard to disrupt. And they made a ruling and a decision that should a city choose to ban storefront dispensaries, that it was within their rights and powers to do so. That was obviously a devastating blow to the cannabis community, and we feel that that decision was wrong, and state law clearly allows for individuals to access cannabis. But we applaud the city of San Diego's efforts in saying, we hear you, California Supreme Court, but we want safe access in our city.
Kim, also, there is an effort underway to ask California voters to legalize medical marijuana for recreational use, like they've done in a few other states. How would that impact local shop owners and laws here?
Arguably not at all. If you look at the other states like Colorado and Washington, they too had medical cannabis before they had full legalization, and it leaves those rules and regulations alone. And I believe that nothing in California would be able to pass without maintaining the fundamental rights of the cannabis, medical cannabis community.
No, David, at last night's hearing, there were a couple people, I understand, that were concerned about your shop. Yes. Do you think they're going to appeal, and who can appeal?
Only those who attended yesterday's hearing. You had to be in attendance, and you had to complete an opposition slip. There were two ladies that came and spoke, and we'll never convince them that it's a safe and effective medication, and that's okay, because
but they're the only two who can appeal.
Those are the only two individuals who can appeal this.
If these appeals are not filed, when do you expect to open your shop?
We have a 10-day waiting period, which we knew about, and you cannot do anything until those 10 days pass. Then we're going to rapidly build out the space, plenty of security measures. We're going to have a guard 24/7. The city only requires that you have a guard while you're open. We really want to be good neighbors. And from the very beginning, if the city said you needed one thing, we would double it. Just to make
cautionary.
Sure.
So
Yes.
do you have a date in mind for when you might open?
We were hoping to open before Thanksgiving, but it'll be before Christmas.
All right. David Blair and Kimberly Sims, thank you very much.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Dyslexia was first discovered in 1881. For over 100 years, though, a select group of doctors and academics actually studied the learning disability. But as KPBS education reporter Matt Bowler tells us, some San Diego parents are still fighting with school districts over how to help with this common learning disability.
This is 10-year-old Zachary White.
One of the pigs is a runt. It's very small and weak, and it will never amount to anything.
He's reading from Charlotte's Web. He reads just like any other fifth grader. Now, it took years for Zach to get here.
Shriked fern. What? This doesn't make sense. Okay.
And he's still working on it, says his mother, Elizabeth White.
Right now, he's up to grade level reading. So he's been through a few years of dyslexia tutoring.
Kelly Sandman Hurley runs the Dyslexia Training Institute at the University of San Diego.
Dyslexia is a phonological processing disorder, so it affects the student's ability to decode and encode, and it affects their fluency rate, it affects their spelling, and it just makes reading more difficult.
Sandman Hurley says dyslexic brains are wired uniquely. Experts at Yale, Harvard, and here in San Diego say dyslexia affects 1 in 5 of us at varying levels of intensity. For dyslexic children, learning to read can be torturous.
Known, run along, now run along.
Zachary's mom, Elizabeth White, knew something was wrong when her son started kindergarten, but she didn't know what.
Not until my dad mentioned a year later, so we're into first grade at this point, that he is dyslexic.
White immediately requested her son be tested, but she learned San Diego Unified doesn't test for dyslexia. Michelle Creasy is the Americans with Disabilities Act coordinator for San Diego Unified. She says the assessments San Diego schools give do not identify dyslexic students.
Well, these assessments wouldn't point to maybe my child's dyslexic. The tests would say, would let a parent, teacher, and educators and educators who support the general education teachers and students know where the student is in relation to other students.
White became frustrated and went to the private market. She spent $800 getting her son tested. San Diego Unified will intervene if a parent pays for a private dyslexia assessment. But White says her son's school offered him help designed for autistic children.
So there's no differentiating between my son being dyslexic and other kids being autistic.
Sandman Hurley says that's not a surprise. Teachers rarely have any training in dyslexia.
So you can have a teacher go all the way through the master's level of teaching, get a master's degree in reading specialist, get a reading specialist degree, get a special education degree, and they still never had one class in dyslexia.
Krishy says sometimes the dyslexia diagnosis isn't enough for a student to be classified as learning disabled.
So having dyslexia would only be one part of qualifying for a learning disability.
What's the whole part?
You'd have to have that 1.5 standard deviation difference between your intellectual ability and your performance.
In other words, San Diego Unified wants to see evidence of a student falling a grade and a half behind. In legal circles, it's called a discrepancy model. Margaret Dalton is the supervising attorney at the University of San Diego's Education and Disability Law Clinic. She says if San Diego Unified is following that rule, then they are a decade behind the law.
And until 2004, which I think is 10 years ago now, that was pretty much what ruled specific learning disability. You had to show that discrepancy. But that's no longer the case. The law changed 10 years ago.
One problem with the discrepancy model is it's not possible for a student to fall behind in kindergarten. The earliest it can happen is second grade, and by then valuable time has been lost. Sandman Hurley says waiting to test a student showing signs of learning disabilities can have long-term consequences for the student.
Yeah, when their child isn't progressing and they know their child's smart and they know their child's trying, and they went to the teacher in first grade and they said, oh, they'll outgrow it. And they went to the teacher in second grade and said, oh, no, he's fine, he's fine. And all of a sudden they're in third grade and you can't read.
And you have to make those tough calls sometimes.
Zachary's mom decided not to wait for the school district to help her youngest son.
Like with my kindergartner now, do I wait for him to get behind and stop tutoring him so I can prove that this is what's going on? Or do I pay out of pocket and have the school never assist him?
White has started her youngest in private tutoring. She's facing the same fight all over again. Matt Bowler, KPBS News.
Millions of folks around the state joined in the Great Shakeout this morning, including nearly 1 million here in San Diego County. The Birch Aquarium in La Jolla combined the shakeout with earthquake-themed video games. Scripps Institution of Oceanography has an official game creator called Scion Games. The team wanted to create something both fun and informative.
Have some zany things like you have to actually get down under the table, and let's have some more scientific things like figure out what latitude, longitude are.
At Scio, all the games are free to download. Just Google Scio Games.
I'm Judy Woodruff on the next News Hour. The triumphant story of a young woman who overcame homelessness to become valedictorian and attend an elite university. That's Thursday on the PBS News Hour.
What are the chances when you walk out of your house you'll run into someone of a different race or ethnicity? Peggy Pico is looking into a new study with some answers to that question.
San Diego politicians and organizations often talk about diversity in local communities, but how do you measure it and how accurate are those perceptions? My guest, iNewsSource reporters Leo Castaneda and Joe Girardi use census data to determine the most diverse neighborhoods in the city of San Diego, and then they mapped their results. Welcome to Evening Edition.
Thank you.
Now, Leo, let's start by defining diversity, because in your reporting, you have a specific definition of diversity.
That's right. A lot of the times when we talk about diversity, we really mean, are there a lot of so-called racial minorities in this neighborhood? And what we're really looking for is more how balanced is this neighborhood amongst a variety of races and ethnic backgrounds. To do that, we used this diversity index that was developed by USA Today that basically gives you probability that if you walk out of your house and run into a stranger in your neighborhood, what are the chances that other person will be of a different race than you are? So that really gives you a picture of how spread out is the population.
So you looked at data from all these different neighborhoods. What did you find as far as which neighborhoods are the most diverse and which are the least?
Well, the neighborhoods that really stood out to us were starting with Encanto. That was the most diverse neighborhood, and just the entire southeastern San Diego region, Paradise Hills, Skyline, as well as Mid-City, were the really standout neighborhoods as far as diversity. And then the least diverse were mostly along the coast, places like Ocean Beach, or even San Isidro, which is, highly Hispanic, is not very diverse at all.
Right, and that brings up a point. Just because you say something's not diverse doesn't mean it's all white people, correct?
Exactly. And, to be fair, a lot of the least diverse neighborhoods are very primarily white, but places like San Isidro is 93% Hispanic. That's not diverse at all.
According to this definition.
Exactly.
Well, I know you spoke with a longtime Southeast resident, Tau Baraka, about his neighborhood. He owns a barber shop, I believe, in Canto. And here's what he said. He had this interesting description of how his neighborhood has changed over the years.
The Filipino community's been here ever since I've been in high school. I'm 47 now. It was very small then. Now it's a large community. Also through the Filipinos, we started seeing a lot of Samoans come over here. There's a lot of Samoans over here in southeastern San Diego. We also seen the rise and the spread of a whole bunch of Eastern Africans and Western Africans over here too. If you just go outside the doors of my barbershop, you'll see probably the entire world walk past,
Did you find in talking to him and others like him that they liked diversity, or it didn't matter, or what was sort of the quick take on that?
I think a lot of people really appreciated the diversity, even from an everyday, having a lot more options of places to go eat, but also being exposed to a lot of cultures, religions, way of lives. It really enriched the neighborhood in a lot of ways.
Now, Joe, you mapped all of this data that we've been talking about, so anyone could search their own neighborhoods. What kind of patterns emerged as we were talking about earlier?
Sure. Well, this is a story that's really about geography. Where you live matters a great deal in terms of the sorts of people you're going to see, the mix, and whether or not it's a diverse neighborhood going by this definition. So we really wanted to give people the opportunity to explore on their own, to see where their own neighborhoods stacked up against some of the others in San Diego.
So let's take a look at this map here that you have on your website. Where was the most homogeneous neighborhood?
Among the most homogeneous, least diverse neighborhoods were those here in red on the coast and the beach communities. Point Loma, Ocean Beach, Mission and Pacific Beach, La Jolla. These tended to be overwhelmingly non-Hispanic white communities. We spoke with a demographer, asked, well, why does that sort of thing happen? And the answer tends to be price. The cost of living in these communities is very high, and that tends to attract folks who have the most money, who tend to be non-Hispanic whites. You compare that with neighborhoods such as Encanto and others in the southeast and in Mid-City, prices are more affordable. That tends to attract a broader range of folks.
So I want to use this map. I'm going to go to your website, and I want to use this map. Walk us through it and tell us what we're going to see.
Sure. Well, the easiest way, if people just want to know, if they're sitting at home and want to know, geez, what's my neighborhood look like? The easiest thing they can do is actually scroll right down. We've got this little button. It says Find Me. If you click on that, the map is automatically going to zoom in with a little push pin to your own neighborhood. So right now we're on SDSU. You see we're in the college area. You can click on it right here, and up's going to pop information about where your neighborhood ranks in terms of diversity and the ethnic breakdown of your neighborhood.
It really is quite interesting. iNewsSource reporters Leo Castaneda and Joe Uriarty, thank you so much. And to use this interactive map, you can go to iNewsSource.org.
Let's recap our top stories tonight. Health worries on two local college campuses, one real, the other a false alarm. A student at San Diego State is hospitalized in critical condition tonight, diagnosed with a form of meningitis. School officials say as many as 400 students may have been exposed to the disease at two fraternity parties last week. They're identifying those at risk and offering them a preventative treatment. And students were evacuated from a building at Southwestern College because of an Ebola scare. School officials say a student lied about her sister being hospitalized because she'd missed classes. They say they're dissecting the incident. No word yet on what, if any, action might be taken against the student. Tonight's stories are online at kpbs.org/evening edition. Thanks for joining us. Have a great night.